A tough weekend for Disney at the box office. Its new Pixar animated feature, Elio, took in just $21 million in North America. That's the worst ever opening for a Pixar film.
This makes Captain America: Brave New World the third largest drop, second weekend drop in MCU history.
At this stage, Marvel are probably thinking to themselves, what on earth is going on here?
Captain America: Brave New World, Snow White, Tentpoles, Elio. All these movies have something in common. These are all movies that completely flopped by Disney's box office standard. Some of these 2025 movies belong to Disney's biggest tentpoles, or should I say, franchises. What I just showed you is the side of the coin that almost everyone tells you about. Because, in all honesty, we all have turned on Disney one way or another after they started pushing certain agendas. Pretty much most of us can agree that recent Disney movies are just really bad. But you see, ladies and gentlemen, for every one side of a coin, there's always another side. Despite having the humiliating box office run, in the year 2025, Disney still managed to make $6.58 billion at the global box office. This wasn't just merely a win, this was their strongest box office performance since 2019. Yes, the legendary 2018-19 run when Disney made more than $11 billion. The thing that gives us a misguided illusion is the fact that we never stop to consider that the 2018-19 box office run is not just Disney's biggest, but also a record-setting run in Hollywood history by any studio.
Okay, this is a big deal, folks. People have been waiting 22 movies in 11 years to see how this ends.
Senior editor for Rotten Tomatoes, Gray, thank you for joining me. A disclaimer, I did not get to see Infinity War, so no spoilers. I'm going to see it this weekend. But let's start with what is now the Super Bowl of superhero movies, Avengers: Infinity War. What drove this film's success at the box office over the weekend?
You know, the biggest thing that drove this thing's success is 10 years of investment from Marvel Studios.
Disney has a long and illustrious history. From Tentpole franchise to Tentpole franchise, whether it's the old days dominated by animations like Mickey Mouse, Chip and Dale, Goofy and Pluto, leading to the days of Walt Disney creating Disneyland in what was a historic broadcast in American history.
Disneyland is dedicated to the ideals, the dreams, and the hard facts that have created America, with the hope that it will be a source of joy and inspiration to all the world.
Laughter for children, memories for the mature, and aspiration for young people everywhere.
There really is no way to describe the pure joy that Disney gave me and many others. Like many of you out there, I once thought that specific run would actually be Disney's peak. And honestly, it will still be an iconic run. But you see, what happened at the dawn of the 2000s, dragging all the way through the 2010s, is simply unbelievable. I'm honestly trying to find the words to properly explain how legendary this next Disney run actually was, but I truly cannot. Let me just let the names speak for themselves. Pirates of the Caribbean, Toy Story, Cars, Incredibles, Frozen, Zootopia, Inside Out, Moana, Beauty and the Beast, and the Star Wars IP. What I just listed to you is not just some blockbuster hits. No, I need you all to pay close attention because it's much more than that. Each of these names you just heard is a standalone tentpole. I cannot explain to you all just how crucial a tentpole can be to a film studio. A tentpole in this context is basically a franchise capable of pulling in over $1 billion in the global box office with just a single movie. Now you see, Disney owns all these major tentpoles. Does this make you understand where the sheer scale of this woke bravado and overconfidence that Disney has actually comes from? There is no film company in history that can even come close. But you see, that's not all, because then there's the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
No, I don't want to spoil anything. I'm not going to tell you if they defeat Thanos, but I know that they defeated money because the opening weekend demolished box office records, pulling in $1.2 billion worldwide. $1.2 billion. That's $1 for every character in the movie.
Holly, Spider-Man No Way Home is already shattering box office records.
It certainly is. At this movie theater alone, or at the Cinemark off of iDrive, they had 46 showings total of that movie today. There have been people coming in and out of these doors all day who have seen this movie, telling me it's the best movie they've ever seen in their lives.
So, how exactly is a supposed dead studio still pulling in such massive numbers and holding so many billion-dollar box office franchises? How does one even get to the point of fathoming the downfall of such a massive company? At first, I wanted to make this documentary about the total collapse of Disney, just like almost everyone has done over the past few years. But the problem is, the deeper I went into this research, the financial filings, and the corporate data, I started to ask myself a very difficult question. Is Disney actually collapsing? Or is something much darker and much more calculated going on behind the scenes? To understand what is happening right now, we have to take some time to rewind back to 2019, right at the doorsteps of the end of the Infinity Saga. Looking back, the quality of Disney and Marvel was at an absolute historic peak. The storytelling was legendary. In fact, for a while, I asked myself, did Disney drop in quality, or were our expectations just unrealistically high? Because the Infinity Saga was that much of a masterpiece. Ever since that time, it has seemed as though Disney doesn't even try to put in effort to tell a story half as compelling as the Infinity Saga. Instead, it's pretty obvious they spend their time and hundreds of millions of dollars pushing this woke agenda. We have seen forced inclusion principles, gender politics, and the race swapping of brands that have existed for decades. And what's the result? We actually lost trust in them. The undeniable sense of hype, that pure eagerness I used to get when a Disney or a Marvel movie was announced, it has completely vanished, honestly. At this point in time, it now seems as though paying for a cinematic experience is more of a risk than the old Marvel stimulus pack that guaranteed a hit was actually in order. I believe I'm not the only one who holds this thought actually. This proves that audiences are craving for good stories over gender politics. Look at the massive success of Puss in Boots, The Last Wish, no rubbing politics on our faces, no woke agenda, just fantastic, emotional, resonant storytelling, and just death, straight up.
And I don't mean it metaphorically or rhetorically or poetically or...
Despite seeing all these obvious patterns very early on, Disney refused to listen. When I started digging into how these woke movies were actually losing, I stumbled across a subsidiary called Hidden Heart Productions. Because the live-action Snow White was filmed in the UK, Disney legally required to expose their closely guarded expenditures in public financial filings under this so-called dummy company. What I found was just shocking. Snow White had a gross production cost of $336 million. Even after a massive UK tax rebate, they spent $271 million, making a movie that honestly nobody asked for. Against the massive investment, it grossed only $205 million worldwide. When you apply the standard 50-50 theater split, Disney recovered just $102 million, meaning Snow White registered a net box office deficit of roughly $168 million. And that's actually before the marketing expenses. Why did this horrible failure happen despite Snow White being such a popular IP? I'm sure all of you, like myself, grew up knowing about Snow White and other stories like Cinderella. So it's definitely an iconic IP and has a very wide, massive appeal. To put this in a simple manner, it was the casting, the controversial CGI dwarfs, and the endless PR disasters that turned the core audiences off. The movie set at a miserable 19% all-audience score. The terrifying part is the fact that it wasn't just Snow White that bombed. Captain America Brave New World was plagued with 21 days of reshoots trying to fix what they said was a broken narrative, which raised their budget past $180 million. Yet, at the end of the day, it grossed only $415 million. This movie, using a legendary name like Captain America, failed to even hit its break-even point. Thunderbolts lost an estimated $85 million. Even Pixar couldn't save Elio from having the lowest opening weekend in Pixar history. Yes, Pixar history, the entire history. I know some of you probably think I'm crazy and that some of these movies succeeded, but you see, in the modern era, any tentpole Disney movie that sells less than $400 million in the box office on a $150 million plus budget is actually a flop, honestly. By Disney standards, it's an absolute disaster. So, if their biggest franchises were actively bleeding hundreds of millions of dollars, this brings us to the ultimate paradox, the unanswered question. How in the world did Disney still report a massive $6.58 billion in theatrical revenue in 2025? What is the system that seems to have made their failures part of the plan for their sustainability? The answer to these questions reveals the biggest layer of Disney's survival strategy. While the mid-tier movies and the politically charged projects crashed and burned, Disney's entire cinematic empire was being quietly carried on the backs of three massive, undeniable titans. Zootopia 2 dethroned Frozen 2, another Disney movie at the top of the animation box office rankings. It made a massive $1.87 billion. Avatar, Fire and Ash brought in $1.47 billion. And the live-action Lilo and Stitch crossed the billion-dollar mark as well. Disney wasn't just thriving because all these movies were good. They were surviving because they had a few too big-to-fail tentpoles. These movies relied on universal appeal, nostalgia, and visual spectacle. Yet, despite everything, this raised another massive question for me. If Disney makes $6.5 billion at the box office, but the studio only keep about half of that because of the theaters, is $3.2 billion really enough to cover the massive budget, the marketing, and the catastrophic losses of their woke agenda? The math still didn't make any sense, until I then realized we've all been judging Disney the wrong way. We look at Disney as a movie studio. We think that if a movie flops, Disney loses. But to Disney executives, a movie isn't just a movie anymore. It's a $200 million marketing portal for something much bigger. In corporate strategy, it's called the Disney Flywheel. Take Lilo and Stitch in 2025, for example. Yes, it made $1 billion at the box office, but that was just phase 1. When it dropped on Disney Plus, it captured 14.3 million views in 5 days, making Disney Plus highly profitable. But the real shocking number? The merchandise. Because of that movie's hype, Lilo and Stitch branded consumer products crossed $4 billion in global retail sales in a single year. Yes, 1 year. Disney's total revenue for 2025 wasn't $6 billion. It was a massive $94.42 billion. How did this happen? Because while you and I are arguing on the internet about a woke Marvel movie flopping, Disney's theme parks, resorts, and cruise liners generated $10 billion in pure operating income. This is the dark yet brilliant design of the Disney Flywheel. The CEO of Disney has already realized that they pushed this whole woke agenda way too far. In 2025, Bob Iger apparently hit the panic button. He initiated a strategy of de-escalation. He publicly promised investors that Disney's mission must be entertainment-driven, not woke-driven. And behind the scenes, they started quietly erasing things. But don't be fooled though, they haven't abandoned their ideology. Financial analysts call this the stealth inclusion. They are balancing their institutional DEI commitments behind closed doors while trying to present a disciplined, anti-political face to the public to protect their core financial assets. They are actually terrified that the audience fatigue we saw on Snow White and Brave New World will slowly bleed into their main core profitable tentpoles like Spiderman or Avengers. So, is Disney collapsing? Financially? No. Their box office numbers might be very volatile, but streaming, merchandise, and Disneyland are printing billions of dollars. The Disney Flywheel is a ruthless, highly resilient financial machine. But in the culture, something has fundamentally shifted. People are losing interest. The repeated disappointments, the prioritizing of agendas over character story arcs, and the complete lack of respect for source materials have shattered one thing Disney used to value above everything else: the audience trust. They might be surviving off sheer momentum of their past greatness, but the magic that made us all care about a Disney release, the hype that used to define our lives, you can't manufacture that type of hype in a boardroom. And you certainly cannot buy it back once it's gone. We the people hand it to them, and we the people can freely take it back.